Hi everyone and welcome back. In the previous two videos we've been working with the V2 page builder. We had a quick demonstration of the various controls that are available in the page builder as well as how to configure those controls. Now today we're going to look at a set of common properties that allow us to format the controls as well as manage the display and layout of the controls on the page. The first property I want to talk about is background. For that I'm going to add a row and add two columns. The column on the right over here, I'm going to now go and set the background to an image. So I can choose from image, color or gradient. Once I've selected image, I'm able to go to the image picker and just pick an image. I click OK and this image will be applied to the background. On the other side, in the left-hand column, I'm just going to show you if I were to set the background to a color. Let's just pick a pale green, and there you go. Now changes are saved on the go. So if I go to my page on my website now, and I refresh, then we should be able to see the changes we've just made. Right, so I'm going to return to the page builder, and the next property we'll be looking at is border. Over here we've got different border types. This is pretty standard. You've got the solid, dotted, dashed lines, etc. For this example I'll choose solid. The border width is going to determine how thick the border is. I'll just go maybe with like a number 3. And then border color, let's choose royal blue. And the border radius allows you to just round the border. So I'll just round it a little bit like so. And then if we return to our page and refresh, we should now see a nice royal blue border. If I wanted to, I could make this green background more transparent. And to do that, I must go to the property over here called Opacity. And so you'll see as I move this left, the background becomes more transparent. And right, it becomes less so. So if I just change it over there and we refresh here, then we can see how the transparency has been updated. Right, so I'll go back to the page builder and add a button onto my column to illustrate the next few properties. So let's give this button some text. Okay, I'll call it submit. There we go. And now what I can do is to change the dimensions of this control. In some instances it's called sizing and in others it's called dimensions. But either way you have a height and a width which allows you to change the size of this control. So I might change it to, let's say, 60 high and maybe 180 wide, and so you'll see that it's increased in size quite a bit. And there we have our button. Right, so going back here, I may now want to change the font for this button. It defaults to Open Sans, but I like using Laura. So if I scroll down, there we go, there's Laura. The font has changed. I might make this a bit bigger. And the weight determines how bold it's going to be. I'll make it very bold for this example. And then you can also adjust the letter spacing like so. Let me change the color of the text to red. And then we can choose whether we want to have the text left aligned, right aligned, whatever the case may be. I'll choose left, but I see now that because the text is so big, we're not really going to see that. So let me make the text a little bit smaller. And there we go, we can see that it's now left aligned. And then if you wanted to, you could also change it, say, to italics. Let's see what it looks like on the website. Right, and so here's our button. It's well spaced, the control is sized as we set it, the text is in red and italics, and it's left aligned. Now I want to take this opportunity to speak about opacity. Before we set the opacity at column level, which means that the entire column and all that is on it will be using that opacity setting. Now I feel the button is a bit vague, so I'm going to return to my page builder, and I'm going to change the opacity to a good size, or to a good level, shall I say. And to get the opacity on the background to be more transparent, I'll just change it in the background setting. And that will leave me with the background being fairly transparent, but the button still showing bright and clear. Let's see. See, that's much better. When we think back to the control demonstration video, we remember that we can set hover properties for background, font, and border. So I'm going to return to the page builder, and I've selected the button. So let's set some hover properties for the background. In this case, I'm going to change the background, let's say, to black. And the opacity and animation speed can also be changed, but we've already looked at those properties. And then similarly for font, I'll just go and change the text color to yellow. Again, size and weight and animation speed are also options that can change on hovering. And then the last one we want to look at is border, and I'll change the border color to pink. There we go. Let's see what it looks like. Okay, so if I hover over the button, we see that the text and the background change as expected, but what we don't see is the pink border that we specified for hovering. And that is, if we return to the page builder, that is because even though we specified a pink border as the hover action, we haven't yet given this control a border type or a border width. So now that I've done that, let's go see what it looks like. So if I hover over it, I now see my pink border as well as the yellow text and black background. So at the moment, I can click on this button and absolutely nothing will happen. That's because we haven't yet configured an action for this button. Now, the actions property is available to quite a few of the controls, but I think it's most commonly used on the button. So over here we have actions, and the action that is available is to open a link. And you can choose whether you want to open a link in the current tab or whether you want to open a new tab. I'll just choose in this case to use a new tab. And then we must configure the link. So we have to tell the system which page we want to open. For that, we can choose from the home page, a specific product, an existing navigation link, or we can provide a custom URL. For this example, I'm just going to choose a navigation link and point to my designer Canturi. Right, now if I refresh the page and click on the button, then it should open the designer Canturi in a new tab. There's a few more properties to look at, so let's return to the page designer. Okay, so SEO, these are the search engine optimization settings we spoke about in our earlier video. And then we've got animations. Animations, you can just play around with this, but basically it will take your control and do really fun things with it. For example, fading up, right, down, left, whatever the case may be. And then we get to position. Now for position, I'm just going to drop another button onto this column over here. There we are. And you'll see if I refresh the page that these two buttons are not perfectly aligned. To achieve perfect alignment, I can now go and first of all look at the X value. Let's just make that a little bit easier to work with. Let's say it's 39% right now. That means I then have to take this button and also set it to 39%. The X value is the value that determines the position of a control on the x-axis, which is the horizontal level. So if I return to my page now, then they should be perfectly aligned. And they are. Now the other axis that we have here is the y-axis, and that is just to move your control up or down on the page. So if I put it there, and that's at 10%, if I check over here, then the other button is at 30%. So this click here button will now be displayed above the submit button. Perfect. There are two more properties that impact on the positioning of a control. These are margins and padding. Take for example in this case, if I wanted to create some space here between the column and the header above it. To do that, I would use a margin, because margins are used to create space outside a control. Padding, on the other hand, is used to create space within a control. So let's first look at margins. So I've made sure I've selected the control I'm working with, which in this case is column, and I'm giving it a top margin of, let's say, 89. Now when I return to my page, I'm expecting to see an open space between the control, which is the column, and the header above it. And that's perfect. So now take for example, if I wanted to create space between the column border and this click here button that we see. There's already space, but I want to enlarge this. So then I must go, and again I'm going to choose column because I'm now creating a space within this control. So I'm going to go to padding, and I'm just going to give some nice padding at the top. And if I refresh, I should now see that the click here button has moved down significantly. And there we go. We can see a much bigger space between the column border and the button. The final property we'll be looking at today is the display setting. Now to illustrate that, I'm just going to go ahead and drop this click here button on top of a submit button. Now when we work with controls, these controls are layered. And whichever control has the highest layer index is the one that's going to come out on top. At the moment, both of these controls have a layer index of 1. Move that one away. And this one is 1 as well. So if I put the small one on top of the big one, and I refresh my page, then that is exactly what we expect to see. Okay. So now if I want to have the submit button covering the click here button, all I need to do is to change the layer on the submit to be higher than the layer on the click here. And so now we expect to see only the submit button, because the click here button will be hiding behind it. There we go. Now the final thing on this property is the ability to hide an element. So let me just go ahead, we're already on the submit button, so I'm going to hide that, which means the only button visible now is the click here button. And so if I return to my page, that is exactly what we see. And so now if we can't see the control that has been hidden, how will we ever access it again? To do that, you need to right click somewhere and click show element layers. And this will give you access to your control that has been hidden, and you can simply change it to show the element again. Just move that out of the way, and there we are. Guys, this is all we're going to be looking at. This has been a lengthy video, but join back where we'll be looking at some of the right click options that are available for us to work with these controls. For example, moving things around and copying and pasting, as well as we'll have a quick look at theming and branding and how default values are set up for our website.